Hey everyone, it's Taylor Ham, GigEm247.com. Got a little recruiting podcast. Been a while since we've done one. Got my man Brian Peroni with me today. We're going to be talking some Aggie recruiting, some plenty of hot topics right now to discuss with the spring evaluation period, some quarterback offers that have gone out. One went out yesterday to Pearland quarterback Connor Blumrick. I think that's probably where we'll start off. Brian is a guy that you know very well. You've seen, you know the family. Coach Mazzone was out there yesterday to watch him throw in person once again. Decided that it was time to go ahead and move on him, knowing that he was probably close to making a commitment to Ole Miss too. Before we kind of get into where he's at with his recruitment, you've seen him at live in person, seen him at, these, I think it was a Dallas regional that for the Nike opening. We saw him work out. He's a pupil of Gerard Johnson too. As a prospect, what's your evaluation of him right now?
I agree with what Mazzoni had actually told Blumrick. He's got a strong arm. He's a big kid at 6'6", 200 pounds or so. But his best days are sort of ahead of him. He had torn his ACL as a sophomore, didn't play then, obviously split time a little bit last year as a junior because he had transferred to Pearland from Friendswood after his freshman year. So it was really his first time in the Pearland offense, but really got better throughout the year, showed, more accuracy. So, he's a guy that has high upside. He's a good player right now, looks really good, but definitely more of an upside guy, and I can see why both A&M and Ole Miss, have liked him. He's looked great in camps this summer. He apparently did well both times. Mazzone has gone to see him throw in person. So yeah, it's really, especially with the lack of quarterbacks in the state of Texas. I mean, I think it's sort of a no-brainer offer there. And once Mazzone was able to see him throw a second time, I think that sealed it.
Yeah, no, in your opinion, because you know this recruitment a little bit better than I do, you've been on the lead on this one. Is this a kid that's going to be comfortable potentially playing with two quarterbacks in one class or being a part of it, assuming he picks Texas A&M?
I think I lost you for a second. I'd heard you say, is this a kid? And I missed the rest of that.
It was, is this a kid that's going to be comfortable potentially playing with two quarterbacks in a class coming in with two?
Yeah, I think some people took some comments out of context a little bit, or maybe they just were worded a little poorly. In that he says he's not coming in to be the number two quarterback. That's not saying that he's not okay with there being two quarterbacks. I think it's just showing his confidence and saying, hey, I'm as good as those other guys. I'm gonna try and win the job too. So yeah, he has no problem being part of a two quarterback class. I mean, he's looking at Ole Miss, which just a class ahead of him has 5-star Shea Patterson. He's not afraid of going there and competing with Shea Patterson. So it's a confident kid for sure. So it doesn't bother him that if A&M brings in another one.
Good stuff. Now, with him and his talents. Where is he at right now in the process in terms of, trying to figure out where he wants to go? Because he seems like he's got a niche to make a commitment. He was close before Texas A&M offered yesterday. Is he a guy that's going to take a little bit more time and evaluate things now that more offers coming through, or do you feel like he could potentially be close to a decision?
Well, it's just A&M and Ole Miss at this point, and like you said, he was very, very close to committing to Ole Miss because he wasn't sure if that A&M offer was coming. And as we wrote yesterday, he's pushed the commitment back a little bit just to really look at everything with A&M and Ole Miss together side by side. But I wouldn't look for this to extend beyond next week. I think by sometime next week he'll have a decision one way or another. He's really got a familiarity with the Rebel coaching staff and likes them a lot, but A&M also has a lot to offer with being close to home, the QB depth chart being a little more, friendly for somebody coming in. So, it's probably a coin toss at this point. So it'll be interesting to see how he feels coming out of the weekend. And I would think that A&M would gain some momentum with the fact that he was really impressed with Mazzone talking to him yesterday.
Definitely. Now, let's stick with the quarterback theme here because, everyone wants to know, who's going to come in and be the guy now that Tate Martell has officially opened up his recruitment. I got a message from Mac Jones after, Tate had opened things up asking me what targets he felt like were top targets for Texas A&M at different positions, which I thought was pretty interesting given a guy that's committed to Kentucky right now. But he's also a guy that is been very open about his recruitment still being open. He's picking up new offers between Mac Jones, Kellen Mond, Jack Sears. That group is, right now, as we know, kind of at the forefront of Texas A&M's board. We'll kind of shift to Kellen Mond. It's another guy that you're very familiar with, that you have a great relationship with the father. Been dealing with for a few years now. What's the latest with Kellen right now? Where's he at in terms of Texas A&M?
I think a lot of people are just a little too quick to assume that he won't end up at Baylor. I mean, obviously he's looking around at A&M, Ohio State, and Auburn, but he's still committed to Baylor, and he's a midterm enrollee. So, we can't just assume he won't end up there. But as far as A&M right now, they're probably behind both Ohio State and Auburn, just because though he wants to see what the results are on the field this year, and it might be tough considering he's a midterm guy to get him to possibly switch there right before he decides to enroll. So that's the one that right now out of the three, or I guess four now with Blumrick they're looking at, I'd probably put him as the lowest odds. That's not saying he won't end up at A&M, but as of this moment, I don't think he's the one that's most likely to end up an Aggie for sure.
Yeah, and you put in your flip pick with Mac Jones to Texas A&M. I think he's a guy that definitely I could see end up at A&M. He's trying to set up a visit to College Station here soon with the staff. I know it'll be probably early June is when he's looking at right now. And, those coaches, have their eyes set on quite a few targets. I know there's some other guys out there like Legend Brumball. There's also the kid that they're going to see from Alabama that I wrote about earlier this week. And then there's still Jack Sears out there that, plans on visiting Texas A&M at one point. So it'll be really interesting to see how this all plays out. And then potentially how things could end up if Blumrick potentially jumps on board with Texas A&M next week. But shifting focus here, Texas A&M just got a new commitment from Derek Tucker, Manville 4-star safety. Kind of came out of nowhere, something we got caught wind of the night before his commitment. Obviously, we went out there and broke that news, but he's a guy that we've been following since he was a freshman, a lot like we kind of been able to see with Deontay Anderson in his progression. Derek, in my opinion, has a little bit more upside and talent than Deontay at the same age, but we know that there's some struggles there that he's going to have to overcome to make sure that he gets to school. But as a pure safety prospect, what have you seen from him, when first setting your eyes on him and how he's developed here over the last couple of years?
Shoot, when we saw him as a freshman, he was already a big kid and athletic kid, and even in a secondary that featured, Deontay Anderson and some other D1 guys, he jumped out. He's still huge, 6'2", 200 pounds or so, and, looks like a linebacker, but, I mean, he moves as well at safety as any other kid we've seen. He's a guy that in 7-on-7, when you don't normally see interceptions, I think the last two state tournaments in 7-on-7, he's had something like 15 interceptions total. I mean, he's just got a knack for finding the ball. So, great player, loves to hit too, and like you said, he's got some work to do. He's got to get qualified and buckle down and really get on that. But now that he's committed, I think you'll see him really, turn his attention to that instead of recruiting. So, if he's able to make it to Aggieland, I mean, that's a huge deal. That's a big time pickup for sure. And it gives A&M momentum from, the whole, Tate Martell and Manny thing, that's sort of, in the national sense, that's sort of gone away as other stories have popped up. But, A&M needed some momentum, and Tucker definitely gave them that.
Yeah, and I think A&M's close to getting some more momentum here pretty soon. I wrote about Hook's athlete, Montrell Estelle, earlier this week about him, being close to a decision in the next few weeks. I know he's a guy that you haven't seen a whole lot of, but assuming things stay on track and he chooses Texas A&M as we expect, how could that help continue to bolster this 2017 class after the losses of Martell and Netherly?
Yeah, once again, it's another 4-star kid, so that's going to open some eyes. A kid that has offers from Alabama, just like Tucker did and some other schools. So yeah, if A&M can show that it's beating these guys for top players, then other people can say, okay, maybe there is something going on.
All right, Brian, a hot topic right now also happens to be satellite camps. Those are right around the corner. The NCAA lifting the ban to allow satellite camps nationwide. We now know Texas A&M plans to go to Los Angeles. They'll have a few in New Orleans, North Louisiana, 2 in Dallas, 1 in East Texas, none in Houston. First of all, your thoughts on just the NCAA lifting the ban. I know it's kind of Pandora's box we're opening with that, and you can go in a lot of different directions, but just your general take on that decision.
I definitely understand why they reversed it and why they lifted the ban, because, there was so much backlash, and there really are some kids that are found at these things, even when, like Michigan comes to Texas to have a camp, they have to do it with another school, maybe a Mary Hardin Baylor or something. Well, if a kid doesn't get a Michigan offer, they could end up with Mary Hardin Baylor or something like that. So it's definitely helpful. So I see it, but it's just gotten crazy this offseason. I mean, they're having Mary Hardin Baylor this summer's having a mega camp with about 15 schools. You have Michigan holding something like 61 camps, including one in Australia, which I don't really understand. So I think you'll see the NCAA institute some kind of rules, before next year, and really have to look at it, because it's just sort of gotten crazy out of control. But, I sort of like the idea, but I've talked to some college coaches that think maybe, hey, just extend the spring evaluation period for 2 more weeks and make sure that, and let the coaches do work and get to see these schools instead of, basically making the kids pay to see them. So it'll be interesting to see who, you have to think that the Texas schools or schools in the SEC are, sort of fertile recruiting territory, going to fight against this. So it's going to be interesting to see who wins, and there's a lot of time to really debate this and look at it.
What do you think about Texas A&M's strategy? I mean, I understand not going to Houston. They should be able to get most of their top guys from Houston to College Station. And what people don't really realize, too, is I think the satellite camps work as just as much of evaluating and finding talent as it is forming relationships with high school coaches and certain people that are leaders in these recruitments, that are the decision makers in the recruitments, and that's a big part of it. And for the Aggies, they have a lot of coaches in Houston that come up and work these camps. Schools that are putting out talent that they're recruiting. These assistants are going up there and helping work these camps. I think where you're seeing it and they're attacking it is they're not having as much success doing that in Dallas and East Texas, and that's why they've kind of focused their attention from Houston up to Dallas and East Texas because of the talent that they're putting out there, and knowing that they do have some ground to make up in that area.
Oh, for sure. And another thing with the Houston deal is that, yes, satellite camps are great, but you would much rather have kids on your campus. I know that some A&M fans are asking, how come the A&M Tulane camp in New Orleans isn't at one of the high schools? Well, Tulane's the one running the camp, and they want kids to come and see their facilities and what they have to offer. And A&M wants the same thing with kids from the Houston area, and most of them aren't that far and can make it. So I think that's another reason you're not really seeing the satellites there, is they want those kids in College Station. But yeah, Dallas is such a fertile recruiting ground, and you can build relationships. There's a lot of guys that do training, training receivers or defensive backs or whatever there to give the coaches a chance to meet them and form a relationship with them. Same thing in East Texas. So I think that, it's sort of, it makes a lot of sense to schedule the DFW and East Texas ones.
Definitely. And not only that, with the New Orleans camp at Tulane, people don't realize that the facilities, the high school facilities in New Orleans compared to the ones in Texas, just not a comparison there. So just being able to have access to a good field is, is kind of hard to find at times in the New Orleans area. But, as far as, getting these camps rolling, how do you see this potentially working out for Texas A&M? It's usually a time where, not only are they handing out new offers, but they're trying to push kids for commitments. Not a lot of these top guys will come in and actually work out for these coaches. It's more about relationship building and a recruiting standpoint. Is there something, in your opinion, that could help, again, have momentum going into the season? Or, are they going to potentially get a commitment from an Omar Manning or, some of these guys in East Texas, maybe a Damian Miller or something like that? Or is this still in your mind kind of something that is not going to be turned around until the product on the field is better?
Well, I think it's probably a little bit of both. But I think the camps are mainly sort of just sowing seeds. I mean, I don't think you're going to, especially in Louisiana and California, I don't see them, just picking up commitments at either one of those places. Maybe a couple new offers will go out, but it's more just saying, hey, look, become familiar with us, get to know us. I mean, this is fertile recruiting territory that A&M wants to recruit. So it's, just getting familiar with the coaching staff. Maybe the ones in Dallas, and Omar Manning or guys like that may not come work out, but they'll come and say, hey, and talk to the coaches and things like that. So, it's about relationships. And, while you may see one or two commits, possibly maybe guys that pick up offers at them and commit a day or two later. I think really, like I said, it's more about the relationship things. And A&M is going to have to prove it on the field. That's something that recruits have mentioned is, they want to see what happens. And in Texas this year, a lot of kids are waiting longer anyway. Texas has always been sort of an early commitment state, but this is, it sort of changed last year. And it seems like it's staying the same this year with a lot of the top guys.
Who, in your mind, are the most priority targets for Texas A&M? And I want to kind of run down your list of guys that Texas A&M, has to land this cycle, and we can kind of keep it realistic because we know it's going to be really tough for them, even if they win a ton of games in the fall, to go land a guy like Jeffrey Okudah, guys like Marvin Wilson, while still attainable. Out of the more realistic ones that are really kind of either have Texas A&M in their top 2 or 3, who are some of the guys that you feel like A&M really just has to just go ahead and close the deal on some of those guys?
Well, A&M definitely needs at least one running back, and, Tennille Carter seems to be the guy there. Obviously watch out for Kennedy Brooks, who was offered this week, but, Tennille, a couple of receivers, tight end would be nice, but I don't think that's necessarily, as big. What would be interesting is, the offensive line. I mean, they have the commits from Grayson Reed and Carson Green, but, can they get a Steven Zabier? Could they possibly sneak in with Walker Little? I think that's an uphill battle there. But the defensive side of the ball, again, is where it's going to be at. I mean, can they get the linebackers? Are there even that many linebackers? Linebackers by far are the least amount of offers anywhere else. But, also Landon cornerbacks, Landon and Kerry Vincent, guys like that. They have Miles Jones, but he could end up being a safety. So can they get Kerry Vincent? Can they get Terrell Bailey from New Orleans? You got Devin Morris there, and safeties, as well. A&M's going to lose a lot of guys. They have Derek Tucker, but if he doesn't make it to campus, then, what is there after that? Can you get Josh Talbot from Long Beach Poly, or KJ Gerald from Arizona, or are you going to see some more offers go out in the state of Texas? Maybe a guy like Donovan Steiner at Bel Air or something like that that's committed to Baylor right now. So, it's really just the defensive side of the ball. I mean, that's where you've seen, people missing, just some things missing in the past. And so that's what, A&M definitely needs to focus on.
I don't have any insight on this recruitment that I'm going to talk about, but I just have a feeling, kind of a gut call, that Texas A&M is going to land a guy that they're not really supposed to land in the media's eyes or what's being said nationally about his prospect. But I actually see John Chavis landing Anthony Hines. I just feel like he's a guy that has been drawn to John Chavis, who he believes in as a prospect, who, that he's put in a lot of work with. And I just wanted to get your take on that.
I mean, it's definitely not out of the question. I mean, Hines has been to A&M numerous times. He always has good things to say about A&M. He's a kid that's going to wait maybe until even the Under Armour game to announce. So, he's going to have a chance to see how A&M does on the field. And I know fans are probably tired of hearing the same thing over and over again, but, that's going to come down to, what happens, what happens on the field. And if A&M puts together, if A&M looks to be improved in the linebacking core this year, then yeah, I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility at all.
Yeah, and I look at some guys that they have to close on. They have to go and land an elite pass rusher that's going to, replace the production of Myles Garrett. I don't think Kayvon Chaisson is a guy that's to a Myles Garrett level yet, but he's definitely an elite pass rusher. I look at going and landing a center like Creed Humphrey from Shawnee, Oklahoma, who's essentially down to Alabama, Texas A&M, and Oklahoma's just still in there kind of creeping. But, to me, I look at kind of what you hit on is, rebuilding that offensive line with hand-picked guys from Jim Turner, going and getting some defensive tackles. I've from what I've heard from sources that Texas A&M they're not really entirely comfortable with their defensive tackle depth. And so from then on, I look at left tackle being another position that they need to go and land a big name at this year. I don't really know who that guy is going to be, if they can go in and get Austin Jackson in from Arizona, the 5-star, this summer to visit. Potentially, you could get into that race, but there's a lot of guys that I feel like Texas A&M's in on and close to landing. You mentioned Antonio Carter, who was going to announce on his birthday on October 3rd, who, right now it's pretty much A&M and Georgia, and we don't think he's a big priority for Georgia. LSU doesn't really see him as a scheme fit, and I have it on good authority on that one. It really kind of leaves Texas A&M. He's a guy that visited 4 or 5 times this spring, works out with Rashad Whitfield, who's a big A&M guy. Of course, you have Courtney Davis, his good friend and teammate, already signed with the Aggies. That, to me, is kind of a no-brainer, but they are in on some other guys, as you mentioned, Kennedy Brooks, Travis Etienne from New Orleans. I don't think they want to put all their eggs in one basket with Toneel just in case something happens. But overall, I think that it's key for this staff to close on the guys that they're right in there for, either leading the Pac 4 or in that main group. And I think there's some other guys we can discuss right now that will be interesting to see how the recruitments, especially at wide receiver. I think I wanted to shift topics there. They're in on so many guys, Omar Manning, Tyrell Shavers, Damian Miller, C.D. Lamb. There's a lot of guys that more heads on. And I don't think Manny Netherly's over at this point either. He's a guy that will play out his recruitment, but even though all the drama happened, at the end of the day, Moorhead and Netherly have a good relationship. In your opinion, Brian, how do you kind of see the wide receiver class shaping up?
I think it's going to be one of those where it's, the first guys that jump on board are going to get it. I mean, you already have Rashad Paul committed, and so that takes up one of the spots, and so you have to wonder, who's gonna end up there after that. I mean, A&M feels pretty good about possibly flipping Damian Miller from Texas, but and if Montrell Estelle from Hooks, jumps on board, I mean, and if they have him pegged for wide receiver, he's also a stud safety, so sort of be interesting if they just have him as an athlete and plug him in later, but yeah, I mean, Jamon Osman, who's, from Houston, but now is at IMG Academy. A&M's in very good shape with him. So that's another, one that could take a spot. So, what happens if Omar Manning wants to take a while, if Tyrell Shavers, even if Manny Netherly wants to take a while and decides that he wants to come back, LSU, I think, is the leader there right now. But if he decides to come back sort of like Courtney Davis did last year, what really happens? It's going to be interesting. They're going to have to make some decisions there on who really is, the priority targets and who's, who they want to take the most, and might have to turn away some kids that are pretty good just because of numbers.
Definitely. Now, finally, I kind of want to shift to kind of a topic that's kind of been a hot topic of discussion on the message boards among Aggies and Longhorns, and that's kind of the momentum shift, the perceived momentum shift that Texas has over Texas A&M with recruits not only in-state but nationally. My good buddy and a guy I respect a lot, Jeremy Crabtree, did a piece on it. Definitely some interesting points on that he made about not only the rivalry but kind of just where the state of Texas is in recruiting and how he feels Texas has kind of regained that momentum. First, do you believe that's the case, Brian? And or is this kind of one of those things where it's just been they've won a couple of big battles and their big finish in January has kind of set the tone for people to kind of make that assumption, or is this kind of a reality?
Well, obviously the signing day finish was a huge deal, and really just showed that it was that there was a lot of momentum for Texas last year. Has it really carried over to the 2017 class? Maybe a little bit, because it seems like Damian Miller and LaGarian Carson at the time made commitments to Texas that seemed like a bit unexpected. They were looking at some other schools, so there's definitely some momentum, but I think with how TCU's playing and how Baylor is playing and how Houston is playing, I mean, I don't necessarily think that one school has the momentum. I think that for the first time in a long time, it's sort of a wide open landscape. But as far as Texas is concerned, a lot of things are gonna have to, it's going to matter how they do on the field this year too. Just like with A&M, recruits are looking there because, the national media is rumbling about, Sumlin being on the hot seat, but they're also rumbling about Charlie Strong the same way. So it'll be interesting, to see what happens there and if it affects recruits, if one or both of them, might not be there on signing day.
And it seems to me, and maybe you can have an explanation for this, but it really seems when we talk to recruits that more recruits feel like Kevin Sumlin's on the hot seat more as Charlie Strong. Can you explain that? I mean, it's hard for me to, looking at it objectively, just based on Charlie's record versus Sumlin's, that there's that actual perceived notion that Sumlin's more on the hot seat.
Sumlin has had one more year at A&M, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think recruits realize that both of them are, but whether this is true or not, there's sort of the national media has put it out there that, if Charlie Strong is gone, that, Tom Herman from Houston is just waiting in the wings. I mean, he turned down some big jobs last year to stay at Houston, and, he's coached at Texas before, and so people just sort of assume that, hey, if Strong's gone, Herman will step right in, and recruits seem comfortable with him. I mean, he's a guy that is a dynamic recruiter, so I think a lot of them that are committing to Texas, they feel okay with, hey, or that are even looking at Texas, they feel, okay, if Charlie's not there, then, Tom Herman will be, and I like him too. So I don't think it's necessarily the fact that people don't think that Strong is on the hot seat as well, but I think they see it as more stable, even though both could be gone. They see Texas as more stable because it seems like they already have, somebody ready to go, whereas A&M would have to do a national search and see what came in if it were the case that someone was let go.
Yeah, I get it. It's more of a seamless transition, whereas there would be a little bit more stability and familiarity with the name coming in. Well, good stuff, Brian. Appreciate the time, man.
No problem.